Good morning, everyone. I'm going to do another V60 demo, but as a coffee roaster, I have a little bit more I can add to the equation. This is our little cupping lab, our little cupping room. We have a Lazy Susan table where we do the traditional cupping. So let's start off with first things first. This here is a coffee tree. Coffee trees can be purchased at a nursery. They make great house plants. It will flower a nice white flower and have a little cherry about the size of a pie cherry. And that pie cherry will produce a seed. And like a peanut, two halves of the seed kind of look like this. And that's a milled coffee bean ready for the coffee roaster. So that's where the coffee tree or coffee bean comes from. Remember, it comes from Ethiopia, Africa, Yemen, really dry areas. So it doesn't do well in tropical climates, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So here's our assistants, so to speak, our flavor aroma wheels. It helps us come up with different characteristics we're looking at in the coffee. As well, everyone on the planet in the roasting business uses these aroma vials. This one is, let me see, that's a taint. That's the smell of rubber. The point is that every roaster everywhere has the same baseline smell, but in here is malt, maple, you'll often hear people say when they're cupping coffee, it has lemon, or it has a buttery taste, or maybe it has, I don't know, cucumber, or just different aromas that come out in it. Dark chocolate, caramel, maple. So these are how we all come up with those flavors and types. So a little bit about brewing. There you go. There's an AeroPress. When you're doing the V60, you can always use a water kettle, or you can do like we do, where we have the kettle here. It's got temperature set and a little more upscale. Regardless, you need the ability to pour the water properly. Okay, the most important thing you can do is buy a good grinder. These are rather expensive for home use, but a good grinder is really super important. A good grinder means you grind the coffee fresh each time. If you grind coffee and brew even an hour later, it's quite stale. Inexpensive kettles, they're available. Doesn't have the gooseneck, but it'll work. It's fine. When we're talking about grinders, inside that little grinder up there is a blade like this. If this were new, it would be so sharp it would cut my finger, but it's not new. So it's an old one. Your coffee grinder at home will have two of those little blades in it, and they do wear out. They do fail. So back to the cupping table here. This is an Ethiopia Yirgacheffe, one of my favorite, most amazing coffees. Over here we've got another unroasted coffee, and you can see a huge difference between these two unroasted coffees. This is a coffee, it's a Sumatra. You can see it looks not as good. It does roast up nice, but the fact of the matter is Sumatra is grown in a rainforest, and coffee is a tree that does best in a dry climate. So these are the types of visuals that you can see on the coffee bean or the seed. This is the Ethiopia Yirgacheffe, one of the most amazing coffees I've ever had. So over here on the defects, we're going to swing the Lazy Susan around and see if we can get that reflection out of there. Here's some roasted defects. These are shells. Some of the things that show up in coffee, stones. Some of the other things that show up in coffee is, remember, it's milled in a plant that milled lima beans, and then it milled corn, and then it milled coffee beans. Just like here, we mill different products in the same mill. So that's a corn. Often they pop in the roaster. And these are green defects. We run about 2% in the specialty coffee grade, buying the top grade. Other roasters will run 50-60% defects. Most of these defects here are fermentation, but you can see some of them are insect damage. So when an insect passes through the fruit and gets into the seed and eats half the seed and does whatever it does in there, this is what you end up with. When those are roasted, they often come up like shells because they fall apart in the roaster. A lot of roasters capture every little bit. So it's kind of the difference between, mushroom tops and mushrooms pieces and stems and parts. So you get what you pay for. The way the roaster will do this is they'll buy a lower grade coffee with defects, and they'll dark roast it and tell you dark roasting is great. And dark roasting is great for profits because it's very profitable to buy a cheap coffee and roast the crap out of it dark, and you end up with something that makes a lot more money. So here's a roasted coffee. The beans swell in the roaster. They should be whole, complete. They shouldn't be chunks and pieces like these defects, and they shouldn't be oily. This coffee was roasted yesterday, and in about 30 days it will get oily. It'll have oil on the surface of the bean, and that's stale. So here's an example of coffee that's very stale. A little hard to see because it's in the jar there, but anytime there's oil on the surface of the bean, that is the staling process, and that is the beginning of, well, the flavors disappearing. So when we're brewing coffee, we use just off boil. I've got a little bit lighter than fine grind for V60. So I've got my 33 grams in there. And I'm going to add, what did I add? Another 30 grams. So I'm going to add 30 grams. I'm going to let it sit there for a minute. Not a minute, more like 30 seconds. The espresso machine does the same thing. When you push the button on a commercial espresso machine or any espresso machine, it pre-infuses or wets the coffee. So I'm wetting it. One of the things you'll notice if your coffee's fresh, this was roasted yesterday and it's like a volcano, is it's going to have a crust or a bloom or be bubbly or gassy. All are the same description. Basically, the coffee is very fresh. When I roast a bag of coffee, if the one-way valve on the bag was to fail, the bag of coffee would explode because it needs to release a bunch of gas. So that's why all your coffee bags always have that one-way valve. So you can see, again, this was roasted yesterday. It might be a little early. 24 to 48 hours is best. This was roasted late in the day. If it's too early, the coffee's not ready. I don't think most consumers have a problem with getting coffee that's too fresh. Maybe if you buy it from Grabba Java, the day it was roasted and you went home and brewed it that day, it would be too fresh. But for the most part, you're going to buy it and brew it probably 24 to 48 hours after roasting. So coffee's like a cinnamon bun. Cinnamon buns fresh out of the oven are amazing. Cinnamon buns 3 days later aren't so good. Coffee's only good for 30 or so days, depending on how it's packaged and how it's stored. Stored in a cool, dry place, away from other aromas, and sealed up away from air. So I've just slowly added, I'm at 400 grams here. I am doing a 33 gram coffee, so I will do 2 cups with this. And with the Hario filter, with the Hario V60 ceramic, and I use the Hario decanter to hold it in. Keep in mind that you should always warm these up with a little bit of hot water. If the ceramic filter is cold, or more room temperature I should say, or the decanter is room temperature or cooler, they will pull off some of the heat from your brew. So the V60 has a spiral grooved system to hold the coffee filter away from the ceramic so that there's actually a gap for the coffee to brew. So I'm just slowly adding water. As you can see, I'm at about 650 grams. 2 cups of coffee would be, 340 grams times 2. That's 12 ounces times 2. So, 340, let's call it 680. I'm at 615. We do have to count for a little bit of water staying behind. Notice that I didn't break the edge. I didn't pour into the corner here and break the corner. If I pour into the corner and break the corner, the water's going to go the path of least resistance. So it's going to not brew. It's just going to go the path of least resistance into the decanter. So I'm at about 720 grams indicated on my scale. Again, scales don't have to be fancy. This is a fancy one. It actually has the ability to run a timer, which I will turn on to show you how that works. So I could have actually timed my brew and said, oh, well, at every 30-second mark, I'm going to add 30 grams of water or something. Not that important. Obviously, you want to know how long it takes you to brew it. So I'm just coming to the end here. I'm totally satisfied with this. I've got 722 grams indicated. I'm going to do 2 cups of approximately 340 grams. So there's your V60 demo. Try and recycle or compost your, you can't really recycle, but compost your coffee waste. It is good in the garden, and we do give it away here at Grabba Java. It goes up to Emma's Acres, and it also gets given out to customers. So if you're gardening with coffee grounds, remember that it does steal the nitrogen out of the soil the first year, so it's best to compost it. And blueberries, rhododendrons, azaleas seem to like it a lot. Back to the green coffee. This is a beet looking coffee. I would normally look at that and go, what the heck, if I was green grading it. That being said, it's from Sumatra and it always looks kind of that way. Again, this is the Ethiopia Yerga Shafé. All graded African coffees are big on the size grading. So these would be sized, so they would go through a screen. And often it's honey washed, which is the fruit is slightly dried on the bean, and it allows the fructose sugars to penetrate the bean and make a sweeter coffee. So that was a long V60 demo, but it was a roaster's V60 demo. So it included a whole bunch of things, from coffee trees to coffee beans, what they should look like and what they should not look like. here. And again, this is insect damage. So as you can see, the bean is missing part of itself. This is fresh coffee. So when looking at a coffee as well, when you're in a cafe, if their hopper is full of oily beans or their hopper is full of those brown oils, it's an indication they're using old coffees. So there's a lot to coffee roasting. At Grabba-Java here, we buy the top grade and we roast several times a week so that we can have the freshest coffees available for you. So thank you very much for supporting organic fair trade. And don't forget, about 80% of the coffees we do are Cafe Feminino, which is taking that one step farther and assisting women farmers. In fact, this Sumatra is a Cafe Feminino. So in South Asia, in a Muslim country, we have women's co-ops ensuring that women have educational opportunities. So sometimes our perceptions of the world are a little off. Cafe Feminino, Google it. Thank you. Grabba-Java, take care. Appreciate it.